For those members here in the room today, we will also be following the health and safety guidelines issued by the attending physician. That includes social distancing and especially the use of masks. I urge members and staff to wear masks at all times while in the hearing room, and I thank you in advance for your commitment to a safe environment for all here today. Last night, on the eve of the date the Paycheck Protection Program expires, the Senate passed a bill to extend the program to August 8th. From the inception of the program, I have clearly stated that until we know where the money is going and how our very small businesses, which includes independent contractors and sole proprietors and minority and women-owned firms are faring, we cannot blindly extend the program. With that said, Congress still does not have the raw loan data it was promised, nor does the public have any information. In May, Congress passed the HEROES Act, which extended the program through the end of the year and set aside funds for small businesses with fewer than 10 employees and leveraging our mission-based lenders, like CDFIs, MDIs, and microlenders. Moreover, this important bill included provisions to require the administration to provide regular disclosure to Congress and the public. Yesterday, Secretary Mnuchin stated he was working with the Senate on the next steps for PPP and spoke of secondary loans. As I have said all along, I invite the Senate and the administration to sit down with us to discuss extending PPP loan authority and the many improvements put forth by members of this committee. We are meeting today to conduct an important hearing on SBA implementation of the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or as some call it, the EIDL program, which was activated on March 12, making it the first economic relief program to assist small businesses adversely impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. I would like to thank Mr. James Rivera, the Associate Administrator for SBA's Office of Disaster Assistance, for being here today to discuss many of the issues surrounding the implementation of the EIDL program. Mr. Rivera, I value your commitment and the hard work of your staff, and I fully understand the extraordinary efforts put forth to respond to this unprecedented crisis. However, we are holding this hearing today because of some very concerning issues that have hindered relief for thousands of small businesses. As you know, we held a hearing last month in which we heard directly from the EIDL applicants about their experiences with the program. One small business owner discussed the negative impact of SBA unilateral reduction of the maximum loan size from $2 million to $150,000, a cut more than 90%. He, like thousands of small business owners across the country, were drawn to the EIDL program largely due to the ability to use an EIDL loan for more than just payroll. Imagine being in the position of thinking this program at a max of $2 million is just what your business needs, only to learn at loan approval that SBA had drastically reduced the loan amount. This is precisely the kind of information that needs to be conveyed to borrowers ahead of time. It makes it a fundamentally different loan product, and for those who needed an amount greater than $150,000, EIDL was rendered irrelevant. Throughout the process, SBA showed a lack of understanding of the challenges facing small businesses related to COVID-19, especially by offering a one-size-fits-all $150,000 loan without offering them an opportunity to apply for a second loan or seek additional funding. Small businesses looking to the SBA for help were essentially told, take it or leave it, regardless of need or size and then told to have a nice day. We also heard from a community pharmacist in South Philadelphia who applied for the EIDL loan but was denied due to unsatisfactory credit history. This is a lifelong entrepreneur who has struggled with razor-thin margins and is now saddled with additional burdens due to COVID-19. Borrowers like the community pharmacists who have been denied for allegedly unsatisfactory credit history have reported that the credit threshold for approving loan is not clear and borrowers do not know what the limit is, leaving them feeling like the decision was arbitrary. I am sure it will be helpful to all if SBA simply communicated the credit minimums to small businesses up front. I have also heard from small businesses who were denied because of unverifiable information, meaning there were items that were reviewed that caused SBA to question the validity of the items. But the denial letter never detailed the information that was missing, leaving applicants with little insight as to why they were denied. Though these decisions can be appealed, that only adds to the delays and expenses of a struggling business owner. These businesses need relief, and they need it now. Even more troubling is the fact that the SBA has not communicated well with applicants, nor has it provided them with reliable ways to check the status of their applications. Borrowers are simply told that the loan is processing. The only other updates they receive are whether the loan has been approved or denied. Applicants need to know where they stand in the queue so they know how much longer they must wait before receiving financing. And given the current economic climate, if they're going to be denied, they deserve to know quickly so that they can explore options for capital elsewhere. Finally, there was a long period during which the EIDL application portal was limited to only agricultural small businesses, which is completely at odds with the intent of the Small Business Act and the mission of the SBA, which is to aid, counsel, assist, and protect the interests of all small businesses. It is particularly troubling to have heard allegations that these loans were being processed before other applications that were already in the queue, and we hope to get a clear answer on that today. As the committee continues its oversight duties, I am looking forward to hearing from Mr. Rivera about how many applications are currently pending in the queue, how much more funding is necessary to meet the loan demand, and what steps SBA is planning to take to ensure small businesses across the country receive the economic relief they need to survive. Already, a number of large companies have declared bankruptcy post-COVID-19, and experts say it's not long before this wave of bankruptcies hits small businesses. We need to be doing more to help avert this outcome. With that, I look forward to hearing from Mr. Rivera on the EIDL's performance in response to COVID-19 and what ODA needs from Congress to fully implement the EIDL program consistent with our intent. I now yield to the ranking member, Mr. Chabot, for the opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you for holding this meeting on the Small Business Administration's Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, popularly known as the EIDL program. At the beginning of the year, the nation's economy and the country's small businesses were reaching new heights. We were experiencing historic levels of unemployment, and momentum was building. For example, unemployment among African Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans was at all-time lows, meaning that more and more people were working. That was a good thing. Unfortunately, COVID-19 made its way to our shores. As a result, a huge number of America's small businesses, coast to coast, were forced to close their doors and turn off their lights. With demand for goods and services limited by this emergency, small businesses shifted to survival mode. It was clear from the beginning that the nation's smallest firms would need immediate access to capital to weather the storm. The SBA was handed a task that was unequaled in our history. Congress, in a bipartisan fashion, and the federal agency that represents, assists, and fights for America's smallest firms responded by setting up the Paycheck Protection Program, which works in partnership with private lenders to deliver funds to small businesses. This program has delivered 4.8 million loans in the amount of nearly over $500 billion now. The SBA also continued to administer the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, EIDL, which had its roots as a post-event recovery program for businesses and communities that were hit by a natural disaster. Both of these programs, from the beginning of this crisis, experienced overwhelming, unprecedented demand. EIDL shifted immediately from being a regional program, a natural disaster typically strikes a particular locale, to a full-fledged national relief program. Thus far, the program has delivered just over 2 million loans for $127 billion. In my home state of Ohio, for example, the program has delivered 45,000 loans for $2.6 billion to date. I would like to thank the SBA for being a vital resource to the nation's small businesses, entrepreneurs, and startups. However, we're a number of months into this crisis now, and the SBA's EIDL program has a lot of room for improvement. While EIDL loans are being processed and the advance grants are being dispersed, too many small businesses are left with questions. Questions on communication, questions on the status of their loan, and questions surrounding the maximum loan amount under the program. When small business owners are left with limited information, common everyday business decisions become difficult. We must strive to provide small businesses with as much information as possible, especially during these uncertain times. I look forward to getting to the bottom of many of these questions and determining how we can work together to provide solutions for our nation's smallest firms. I want to thank the SBA's Associate Administrator for the Office of Disaster Assistance, Mr. James Rivera, for joining us today. Look forward to his testimony and also obviously answering questions from members on both sides of the aisle. As was the case prior to the COVID-19 outbreak, I know that small businesses will once again be our nation's guiding light. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chabot. I'd like to take a moment to explain how this hearing will proceed. Each witness will have 5 minutes to provide a statement, and each committee member will have 5 minutes for questions. Please ensure that your mic is on when you begin speaking and that you return to mute when finished. With that, I would like to introduce Mr. James Rivera, the Associate Administrator for SBA Office of Disaster Assistance. In his capacity, Mr. Rivera directs the SBA Disaster Loan Program, including EIDL. He began his SBA career in Texas in 1989, serving as a disaster loan specialist. Over his 30 years SBA career, he has also served as the Associate Administrator for the Office of Financial Assistance, and prior to his public service, Mr. Rivera was a commercial loan officer in the private sector. We welcome you back to the committee, and you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Velasquez, Ranking Member Chabot, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the agency's Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program and our response to the coronavirus pandemic. In March, SBA worked with all states and territories to facilitate approval of 56 disaster declarations for small businesses affected by the pandemic. At that time, Administrator Carranza made an important administrative change to ease the business impact certification. This enabled SBA to provide disaster loans for small businesses in all 50 states and 6 U.S. territories, and it established a nationwide disaster assistance program. As a result, the loan numbers and dollars we're experiencing are unprecedented so far. This agency has provided economic relief to over 6.8 million small businesses for over $147 billion. This more than doubles the amount of disaster aid provided in the entire 67-year history of the agency. To help achieve that, SBA created and implemented an entirely new online portal application and distribution system for EIDL loans and grants. This system has now handled over 8 million applications and has allowed us to distribute dollars to those small businesses in record time. Currently, we're processing grants in less than 2 days. The pandemic and nationwide program has also required the agency to scale up our disaster staff, now totaling over 7,000 personnel. Meanwhile, our program office continues to service 175 other major and agency disaster declarations, which total $1 billion in natural disasters this year, including the 2 recent requests from governors for small businesses assisted in areas of civil unrest. These successes, unparalleled and historic for the agency, have not been without their challenges. However, let me mention a few. First, between mid-March and the end of April, the agency had to stop processing applications 3 times. This was due to the program changes made through CARES Act legislation, the lack of funds, and the need to stand up an entirely new system to administer the grants. During this time, the agency received close to 4 million applications in a 2-week period. This did set us back, and we've now been working hard to catch up since. And moving quickly to build the new system, we unfortunately were not able to provide the same internal visibility as exists with our disaster loan application portal. This, combined with the application volume mentioned above, resulted in uncertainty for many. Following the exhaustion of funds and in receiving additional funding, the agency looked at how best to maximize these dollars for pending applications. Newly eligible agriculture enterprise businesses and future applicants in reopening the portal 2 weeks ago. We also need to keep in mind that the disaster application period, as defined in the 56 declarations, runs through mid-December. With regards to the idle grants or advances, the agency also looked at how best to maximize those funds. We consulted bill authors, and through a per-employee allocation, we now have been able to reach 2.2 million more businesses with financial aid. I mentioned the significant growth in our staffing, but that comes with the need of education and training. We continue to adjust every week to the demands in our call center and in our loan processing centers. In highlighting our successes and reflecting our challenges, it's also important to evaluate where we are today. We have been continuously processing loans for 2 months. All applications have now been initially decisioned. All advances have been distributed. Our processing times due to volume and stoppages averaged around 41 days. Since we reopened the portal, our processing times for new applications are now 5 days. We are much stronger and at a stable operational staff level today, and small businesses are getting the needed dollars dispersed to them in record times. At SBA, our mission is one of service. We have a proud history of helping small business owners in their time of need. Every disaster event is unique, and there are always lessons learned. While facing a disaster situation unlike any in our agency's history, we have had to do this while operating in a telework and virtual environment ourselves. And we've also not been affected by the pandemic, losing one of our dedicated staff members to the virus. In the end, I know we share a common goal: to provide economic relief to American small businesses. We will continue to do our very best, and we will continue to work closely with you to achieve that goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Rivera, SBA received approximately $2.7 billion in funding for salaries and expenses to fulfill your mission to deliver the PPP, EIDL, and other agency programs to struggling small businesses. What portion was allocated to the Office of Disaster Assistance? How much has been spent, and what have been the biggest cost drivers?
Thank you, Madam. We received 2 sets of funds. We used $7 billion initially In our existing disaster funds, it was carryover from Harvey, Irma, Maria on the loan side. On the administrative side, Congress was generous enough to give us $470 million, and we're close to spending through that right now. The $2.1 billion we have planned out over the next, I think it sunsets in September of 2021, so we're working through that funds right now. Major costs, to answer your question, we have 7,000 employees. We have close to 2,000 contractors. We're running a 24/7 operation at the call center. So a lot of these expenses that we've not had in a natural disaster have grown exponentially with this effort.
So you hired more staff, you hired contractors to help you perform the duties of the office in providing assistance to small businesses. And so that is one of the first issues that I raised, and I was the one fighting here to get that money to you because I've been in this committee for 28 years, and I know every time that there is a natural disaster, how bad the agency has failed because budget has consequences, right? And every time that the budget is cut, so manpower is going to be reduced, and here we are. Of course, that we provided the money to hire more staff and to hire contractors, bring in contractors, but then there is the training and so on. So those are issues that we need to keep in mind because climate change is not going away, and we're going to be in this position many, many times more. Mr. Rivera, I have heard countless complaints about SBA's poor customer service. Applicants spent hours on hold only to be told their applications were pending and to check back again next week. Why were SBA systems unable to provide more detailed information regarding the flow of the application through the approval process?
Let me, if I can, take you back to mid-December. We started this. We have this system internally that we respond to, natural disasters. It's the Disaster Credit Management System 2.0. We use that for the first 2 to 3 weeks. When we received the opportunity to do a grant program, which we've never had a grant program on the disaster loan side, we pivoted to an existing contract that we received post Harvey, Irma, Maria. It was a surge contract that enabled us to rebuild it. And looking back, we should have had visibility, no doubt about it, similar to the way we have with the pre-disaster loan application portal, the disaster loan application portal. What happened, though, is in our angst to get this service out and get to this new portal, we did not have visibility in the application portal. Once we get invited into the loan queue or to the grant queue, there's visibility, but in hindsight, we should have added that additional visibility that we didn't have.
At the Senate hearing a few weeks ago, Administrator Carranza said that the SBA was working to add more visibility to the automated system. When will that be completed?
So we don't have any loans in the application queue anymore. Everything's been processed. Since we've reopened the portal, we've received close to additional $2 million loan applications. Everything is in the loan queue. So there's visibility from that perspective, and all grants have been processed.
So why then did she say that the administration was planning to add more visibility?
I think you go back to the June 15th date. It's just the amount of applications we had in the queue. I think it was a timing issue.
Okay. So thank you. Mr. Rivera, we understand that SBA limited the size of the IDA loan to $150,000. What percentage of applicants had requested and based on the IDA calculation should have received more than $150,000? So
we currently run 80% of the applications are below $150,000. The average loan is like $61,000 overall. We have 19% of the applications that are at that $150,000 threshold.
So can you answer my question? Just the percentage of people that applied for 2 million that
Right.
didn't receive it and just got 150,000.
So, Madam, I don't have that information because.
Can you please
we-
forward that information to us?
Sure, but we determine economic injury. You can request whatever you want, but it's based on 6 months of working capital. And I think we could have done a better job communicating that it's based on 6 months of working capital. It's not based on whatever loan amount that you're requesting. It's different than a traditional, bank loan from that perspective.
Okay, my time has expired, and I now recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Madam
Mr.
Chair. Mr. Rivera, I've heard from many small businesses and numerous members of Congress about the lack of communication coming from the SBA with regard to the EIDL program specifically. How can we work together to ensure that small businesses receive the most up-to-date information on EIDL assistance? And are there any programmatic changes that we need to consider?
The last 3 months it's been a tough road, obviously. This is a national footprint. It's not a regional disaster from that perspective. We've learned a lot from a communication perspective. And to answer your question, we need to do a better job of getting what the program guidelines are out there and being able to, for all small businesses to understand from that perspective. We thought we were communicating pretty well from the perspective of when we talked to each individual business owner, they knew exactly what we were trying to do and what we were trying to address their needs. But there's always room for improvement, and we're willing to work with Congress however you see fit.
We definitely would want to work with you on that, and I think both sides, this is a very bipartisan committee, and I think we can work together with you to improve this. As we consider ways to improve the federal response to this emergency and emergencies in the future, do you believe that private lenders could have a role within the disaster loan program?
Let me state what we're actually doing. We had the surge contract. We've actually used this surge contract. The name I'll hold back the name of the company. I can tell you offline if you want. But basically, this company is doing what private lenders are doing. When we move to this portal, they're processing the loan for us. Under the traditional EIDL, the goal is 2 loans per day. Under this contract that we're using, where we have this business doing this bank type business doing an algorithm, we can do 25 loans a day. So we are using the private sector in a private-public partnership relationship to process these loans. We could have not processed on our existing platform. That's why we stopped for 2 weeks. We went in, we built this portal with this company, with this institution, and that's what's enabled us to do that. Definitely moving forward, this is the path forward. It has increased the cycle times, it's increased the productivity, it's helped us provide quicker, faster service from that perspective.
That's good to hear, because obviously injecting some of the private sector and competition in the government, which tends not to be, no offense or anything, a little less efficient because, we don't compete with others. They do. So, and we learned that in the PPP program. We had the private sector out there make the loans, and I think that sped up the process tremendously. My next question, we know more about this emergency today than we did in March. We're also starting to see some businesses return under modified operations. Congress is currently debating the federal government's next steps as it pertains to this emergency. As we continue to have these discussions, where should we concentrate our efforts within the EIDL program? Where should we make adjustments to ensure the program assists current small business applicants? And how can we structure the program to be flexible and nimble when the next disaster strikes?
Well, I have to thank the committee and Congress from the perspective of what you enabled us to do. You eliminated some statutory requirements. The credit elsewhere test is not required. We didn't have to get federal tax returns, so we went truly with just a credit score from that perspective. So you've been very helpful through this process. As we continue to take a daily look at the amount of volume that we have 8 million applications in relation to what we processed. We'll continue to have that discussion as far as other opportunities that we may have.
Okay. How are you and how should we measure the effectiveness of the EIDL program?
Effectiveness. I wish I could approve every loan. I really do. We have to have a credit standard. We are a loan standard. I mean, we have our current approval rates, 51%. One of the things that's been different with this new portal is we have DocuSign type document where we're able to immediately disperse within the next day. Generally, under the traditional process, it takes us 2 to 3 weeks because we're flipping paper back and forth between us and the small business. We're 99% dispersed. So of the $131.9 billion that we've approved, we've already dispersed $130 billion to the small businesses. That's money in their bank. I mean, there's a day turnaround time from that perspective. So it's been a positive experience. That's one of the real lessons learned that we've used from a technology perspective, using the algorithms, using those type of features. What we need to figure out is how can we better improve on these individuals, these small businesses that we decline. Many of them received grants, you know, the advance from that perspective, but we're going to come out with the lessons learned, and we'll be sure to share that with you when this COVID period ends and we can move on and look back from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. My time's expired, Madam Chair.
Time has expired, and now the gentlelady from Kansas, Ms. Davis, is recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman Velasquez and Ranking Member Chabot, for holding this hearing today. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or EIDL program, is definitely meant to provide an immediate lifeline to small businesses who are struggling to stay afloat during the coronavirus pandemic. But I have heard from too many small business owners in my community that they're experiencing chronic delays, a lack of transparency in response to their applications. And I know we've kind of been talking about that this morning already, but Mr. Rivera, first of all, thank you for joining us today. As I've heard from my constituents and witnesses in this committee that the chairwoman referenced earlier around their frustration, I'm curious about, whether or not you all are working to provide more step-by-step information for applicants, and then, whether or not you're going to be able to have more frequent and open communications going forward, because you're talking about the technological and operational work that you're doing. I'm just curious what that's going to look like going forward.
The current portal that we're using is exclusive to COVID, and what we've done is we have 1 to 2 million individuals that are in certain parts of the queue, so we'll continue to communicate. We've reached out 5, 6, 7 times via email. We're calling these 1 million to 2 million people through our call campaign. We're leaving messages. If I could fast forward to today, we're better operation than we were, 90 days ago when we were standing up. Internally, we had to understand this new portal ourselves. So looking back, we should have probably